In a world turned upside down by a massive cataclysm, monsters and levels appeared, changing everything. Suddenly, your strength wasn't just about muscle. It was about a number that followed you everywhere. A level. And in this new world, the higher your level, the better off you were. Deep within a dark dungeon, a man stands face to face with Nergal, a monster shrouded in mystery. Its level hidden behind a question mark. This puzzles the leader, a powerful figure at level 457, who can't fathom facing a foe whose strength is a complete unknown. How can you fight what you can't measure? As danger looms, a voice urges the man to run, to save himself. But he refuses, determined to protect Soul from destruction. They must stall for time, waiting for reinforcements. He watches his team dash towards the portal, their only escape, then turns back to face the monster, sword in hand. Declaring that sacrifice is part of his nature, he charges at Nergal. But the battle turns grim. Nergal's axe comes crashing down, and the man is sent flying, his guardian armor shattered, his health dangerously low. As he struggles to his feet, he wishes for a higher level, for more strength. With Nergal's axe swinging down once more, he braces for the end. Then, out of nowhere, an explosion. A figure steps in, stopping Nergal's massive axe with a mere dagger, an act that leaves the man in utter disbelief. How could such a small weapon stand against such power? This newcomer, with confidence and grace, faces Nergal head-on, dodging attacks with ease. In a breathtaking moment, he climbs Nergal, reaches its head, and with a swift slice of his dagger, ends the monster's reign. The man, still in shock, asks who this hero is and what level he possesses, only to be stunned by the answer. I'm just level 1. But this story starts earlier, with our hero searching through dungeons, not for monsters, but for cacao books, seeking the knowledge to thrive in this new world as a hunter. The advice from the cacao books was crystal clear. Success comes from pushing yourself to the limit, even if it means staring death in the face. Failure, that's on you, for not trying hard enough. So before pointing fingers at the world or bad luck, maybe it's time to look in the mirror and face the real culprit: laziness. This idea made him so mad that he threw his phone on the ground, scoffing at the notion. Yet, as he glanced back at the monster now lying lifeless behind him, a part of him wondered. For 7 long years, since he was 20, he's been chasing the dream of becoming a hunter. 7 years of effort, hope, and repeated disappointments. The hunter exams were brutal, filled with challenges like battling fierce monsters in sprawling dungeons. And with his level being so low, he stood no chance against the beasts that were set as his targets. Even when he managed to level up a bit, those with better gear would sweep through the monsters, ending the exam before he even had a chance. Working odd jobs all day just to afford some decent equipment left him so drained that he'd often collapse from sheer exhaustion during the tests. Glaring at his phone again, he couldn't help but wonder who wrote that infuriating advice in the cacao book. He was itching to give them a piece of his mind. Just then, he was snapped out of his thoughts by a shout. "Intern," called the hunter supervisor, asking if he had cleared out all the low-level monsters in his area and was now slacking off. He replied, a bit defensively, that yes, he had taken care of them. The supervisor then instructed him to head back to the starting point to turn in his loot. And then, the question that made his blood boil. Why was he resting, glued to his phone, instead of jumping at the chance to join the boss raid? Biting back frustration, he knew all too well that interns like him were never considered for boss raids. Those spots were reserved for the well-off, or those with connections, not for nobodies like him. The supervisor's suggestion felt like a mocking lie. A cruel reminder of the barriers that stood between him and his dream. Rushing to make amends, he quickly apologized to his supervisor, promising to head to the location immediately. The supervisor, with a hint of impatience, urged him to move faster, muttering about the wild ways of the younger generation. As he dashed off, he couldn't help but think of the supervisor as a bit of an old grump. Arriving at the designated meeting spot, he noticed a smaller group than expected huddled to one side. He was puzzled. Weren't there supposed to be more members in the first party? Could it be that others were also dragging their feet, just like him? Out of the blue, someone hailed him. Future high-ranker Lee Jin-woo. It was Kim Min-seok, a buddy from high school, who eagerly inquired if he'd managed to level up. Lee Jin-woo, slightly amused and bewildered, retorted, asking why Min-seok was so obsessed with the idea of him climbing the ranks, especially when he had no such ambitions himself. Moreover, he was curious about the small size of their party. Min-seok then let slip a piece of news that caught Lee Jin-woo off guard. An emergency call to action had been issued by the guild because of a newly discovered A-rank dungeon, leaving their current D-rank dungeon a lower priority. This explained the reduced party size and the absence of other members. The stakes were high, Min-seok explained, with the rewards for conquering an A-rank dungeon being incredibly lucrative, enough to overshadow their current assignment. The plan, as Min-seok outlined, was audacious, yet simple. With just the remaining guild members and 2 interns, they would defeat the boss of the D-rank dungeon. This revelation sent a wave of excitement through Lee Jin-woo. The possibility of leveling up that day sparked a shared moment of joy, culminating in a high five. Curious, Lee Jin-woo asked about the 2 guild members who would be joining them. Taking on interns and aiming to defeat a D-level dungeon boss seemed ambitious. It would require significant strength and experience. Min-seok confessed he hadn't been given the details but expressed confidence in the guild's judgment. They wouldn't pin their hopes on anyone less than capable, he assured. He also mentions the dungeon boss is known for a dangerous trait: self-destructing when its health drops too low. Understanding the gravity of this, the guild calls an emergency meeting, aware that tackling such a boss requires not just any hunter, but those of a certain caliber, a level high enough to stand a chance. Yet, doubts cloud the feasibility of this plan, sparking a conversation about readiness and experience, particularly with Circamus, a task not for the faint-hearted. One of the members, a newcomer with no prior experience in boss raids, finds himself under scrutiny. His only knowledge of dungeons comes from observation, not participation. His inquisitor, wielding a sword and radiating an aura of concern, reassures him, pointing to the reliability of good gear as a backbone for survival. Choyong, a member with a modest level of 55 and the financial backing of a renowned corporate lineage, stands as a testament to the guild's strategy. They opt to leverage not just skill but resources, inviting those who, like Yong, might not have the highest level but bring other assets to the table. Jin-woo, pondering the situation, considers the presence of a veteran hunter, someone with a level surpassing 100, as barely sufficient. Their eyes then fall upon a formidable figure, the hunter's supervisor with a level of 205, a beacon of hope in this dire scenario. This overgeared master, Yong, is expected to compensate for the lack of power among the rest, a tall order given the unpredictable nature of boss raids. The challenge is not just the boss itself but the minor mobs that emerge sporadically, testing their strategy and adaptability. The raid team must be vigilant, ready to shift focus as the boss changes its attack targets, to avoid being overwhelmed and picked off one by one. With the knowledge that Circamus will self-destruct within 3 minutes once its health falls below 30%, the team is under pressure to decide the battle swiftly. The supervisor emphasizes the importance of understanding the boss's patterns and dealing effectively with the random mobs. When faced with the threat of self-destruction from these mobs, strength and strategy must converge to counteract the danger. A hand raises, voicing a concern that echoes in the minds of many. What if their damage output is insufficient? The supervisor's words hang in the air, a stark reminder of the perilous choice they face. Venture into the unknown and fight with the risk of death looming over, or escape, sacrificing the rewards for safety. He emphasizes that an unchallenged boss room might lead to the dungeon's clearance through self-destruction, but at the cost of valuable experience points and treasures that lie within. With a firm grip on his sword and a battle cry to match, he commands action. The interns, though hesitant, step into the dungeon one after the other, leaving the supervisor in a moment of solitude, aware of the irreversible path they've now taken. Yang, curiosity piqued, turns to Jin-woo, sensing a depth of experience beyond the average. He questions Jin-woo about his past victories over dungeon bosses, hinting at a level of skill that surpasses the ordinary. Min-seok chimes in, bolstering Yang's suspicion with tales of Jinwoo's triumphs, his playful wink adding a layer of mystery. Yang, feeling the weight of his inexperience, proposes a strategy of unity. By combining their strengths and dividing roles, they could enhance their effectiveness in battle. A suggestion that quickly gains approval. Ninseok, with a firm handshake, expresses his eagerness to join forces, especially with the prospect of leveling up by defeating the formidable boss monster, Circlemus. Yang, too, shares this ambition. His eyes set not only on the experience but also on the coveted items the monster guards. Minseok, sensing a camaraderie forming, extends an invitation for a celebratory drink post-victory, a moment of lightheartedness amidst the looming challenge. As Yang stands amidst the unfolding plans, his thoughts drift to the broader implications of their quest. Beyond the immediate thrill of battle and the lure of rewards lies the potential for strategic alliances, possibly even gaining access to higher-level dungeons through connections. The question of whether their primary aim is the thrill of the fight or the weaving of influential networks with the Keyball's son lingers. Understanding the importance of connections in this new, level-based world, our protagonist knew that networking with the wealthy could open doors to dungeons that were otherwise out of reach for ordinary hunters like himself. When Yang offered his hand in greeting, brimming with excitement, he accepted it gladly, recognizing the golden opportunity before him. Led by Yang into the depths of the dungeon, he couldn't help but notice Yang's unsettling smirk, a look that sent shivers down his spine. Something felt off, but the promise of adventure and the chance to level up overshadowed his doubts. As they ventured further, they encountered Circlemus, a formidable foe whose strength was rapidly depleting. Just when victory seemed within reach, the ground trembled, and an army of undead, numbering over 50 and each one 100 levels stronger than the average, emerged, catching the team off guard. Amidst the chaos, he managed to shatter the skull of one assailant, but the sheer number and strength of their enemies filled him with dread. Hearing Minseok's voice cut through the din, he realized they were on the brink of being overwhelmed. Calling for backup seemed their only hope. The supervisor, engaged in a fierce battle with the boss, demanded an update, urging them to clear the lesser enemies and rally to his side. But with the skeleton horde bearing down on them, assistance seemed impossible. Minseok, ever brave, took it upon himself to hold back the tide, insisting they focus on Circlemus. Despite concerns for Minseok's safety, his determination was infectious. With a heavy heart and a burst of adrenaline, he lunged towards Circlemus, now weakened to 27%, with a promise to end the battle in mere seconds. Their attacks were relentless, and under the supervisor's urgent commands, they pushed Circlemus even further, its strength dwindling to 23%. But as the timer ticked down, despair set in. Their efforts, seemingly futile against the ticking clock, led him to call for a retreat. Yet, the supervisor's refusal to give up, comparing their dire situation to a mere game, struck him as madness. In a world where levels determine fate, their struggle against Circlemus was no mere match. It was a fight for survival. As they navigated the chaos, it became increasingly clear that this was no ordinary challenge. It wasn't like any sports game where a loss meant another chance to win. Here, a single misstep could mean the end for all of them. Amidst the tension, a warning shout gave him just enough time to dodge an attack from a skeleton, though not without earning a minor cut across his nose. Gathering his resolve, he faced the skeletal foe head-on and with a powerful slash, sent it crashing to the ground. He couldn't help but shout out, a mix of adrenaline and disbelief at their narrow escape, only to be met with the horrifying sight of more skeletons swarming towards them. The supervisor, taking in the scene of chaos and the interns scattered on the ground, couldn't help but curse at the dire situation. With a sense of urgency, the supervisor commanded him and Yang to tend to the injured as they planned a strategic retreat to the safety outside the boss's room. Both quickly agreed, understanding the gravity of their predicament. But fate dealt another blow as Yang cried out in pain, a skeleton's blade piercing his leg. Without hesitation, he rushed to Yang's side, instructing him to duck before eliminating the threat with a precise strike to the skeleton's head. Following the supervisor's orders, he supported Yang, ensuring they both stayed close as the supervisor worked to clear a path for their escape. Minseok was called upon for assistance, to which he promptly responded, understanding the urgency of their situation. The supervisor then faced the daunting task of breaking through the skeletal blockade that stood between them and the portal, all while the system ominously counted down the last 19 seconds before the boss's self-destruction. Realizing time was of the essence, he lifted Yang onto his shoulders, urging him to hold tight. As they made their way to the portal, Yang, amidst apologies and explanations, was reassured that their focus should remain on escaping the immediate danger. Once outside, Yang, with a smile, sought reassurance of his well-being, to which he confirmed but stressed the urgency to move swiftly without delay. Minhyuk and the supervisor, already at the portal, urged them to hurry. With a quick decision, he propelled Yang towards them with a plea to catch him. With only 6 ticks left on the clock, he managed to slice a skeleton in two right behind him. When the countdown reached 4, he made a dash towards Minhyuk and their supervisor, who were carrying Yang. But then, in a quiet voice, Yang called out to him, stirring confusion. Yang then asked if he really thought everything was okay, and with just 2 seconds to spare, Yang's foot connected, sending him flying back into the dungeon. As the timer struck 0, the dungeon erupted in a fierce explosion. He saw himself as a young boy again, bursting with excitement as he ran to his parents, proclaiming his arrival and his dream of becoming a hunter. His mother, curious, asked if he wished to protect others from monsters. His answer was simple. No, he wanted to rake in heaps of money to support his siblings, fix their leaky roof, and get a new car to replace their old clunker. His mother questioned if that was truly his dream, to which he added that marrying someone beautiful was also on his list, hence the need for a substantial bank account. His father, chuckling, remarked on the grounded nature of his ambitions. Just as his dad was about to add more, he eagerly inquired what he was about to say. Suddenly, his parents' faces morphed into grotesque monsters, jolting him with the question of why he was lying there so still. Waking up with a start, he found himself pinned under rubble, darkness enveloping him, leaving him to wonder if he had lost his sight. That's when he heard his name being called out. It was Minhyuk and the supervisor, searching from above. The supervisor noted the items scattered around, hinting they might not have escaped after all. Yang, filled with guilt, admitted his blame for Jinwoo's disappearance, igniting fury in him, especially knowing Yang's betrayal. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the stones above threatened to give way. Curses flew from the supervisor as the dungeon's impending collapse loomed, a direct aftermath of the explosion. The boss had given them a clear command: grab what you can, forget about what's trapped under the debris, and get out. Minhyuk, with worry in his voice, told the boss they couldn't leave without finding Jinwoo. The boss shook his head, saying it was impossible to find him under all that rubble. Despite Minhyuk's pleas, arguing Jinwoo was still out there, alive, more rubble tumbled down, nearly silencing his hopes. The boss, seeing tears in Minhyuk's eyes, reminded him. A dungeon is a hunter's final resting place. It's the unwritten rule of our kind. With a heavy heart, Minhyuk stepped out of the dungeon, apologizing under his breath to Jinwoo, who was struggling beneath the stones, calling out for help. Buried and losing hope, Jinwoo pondered over his choices. Was it his decision to help Yang, the injured, that led him here? Or was it signing up for this dangerous internship? He questioned Yang's motives too. Was it greed? Envy? Despite Yang's wealth, why sabotage him? Jinwoo's mind was a whirlwind of regrets and unanswered questions as he lay there, expecting the end. But then, an eerie vision of his parents with twisted faces jolted him awake. Is this really what you wanted? They seemed to ask. This sparked a new determination in him. He refused to let this be his end. Checking his status, Jinwoo was astonished to see he was barely hanging on, with just a sliver of health and mana left. Desperately, he reached for his phone, using its light to reveal a grim sight of stones and bones encasing him. Then, a draft of air brushed against him, leading his eyes to a tiny hole above. That breeze meant there might be a way out. With newfound hope, Jinwoo began his climb, determined that even if this was his end, he'd face it trying to break free. His hand broke through to the outside, pulling himself out of his stone prison. After a harsh coughing fit, he was relieved to be alive but stunned by the sight that greeted him. As he stood there, puzzled, he realized something extraordinary had happened. The room he was in didn't look anything like the boss's chamber where he had been just moments ago. Instead, he found himself staring down what appeared to be a mysterious passage. Just as he was trying to make sense of it all, he heard a peculiar sound emanating from the passage's heart, and before his eyes, a portal began to slowly reveal itself. He couldn't believe it, a dungeon portal, right here. Edging closer, he wondered if the explosion had somehow unearthed a secret dungeon. Pausing at the portal's entrance, he felt a sense of dread. His gut feelings never misled him. Tentatively, he reached out, and the moment his fingers brushed against the portal, a message popped up, confirming his fears. This was an SS rank dungeon. SS rank, known for being the pinnacle of danger, where even the bravest heroes hesitated. His first instinct was to turn tail, to choose life over facing what lay beyond that portal. But fate had other plans. A massive stone block crashed down, blocking his path and sowing confusion. As the ceiling began to give way, his only choice was to retreat back to the portal. "This is madness," he yelled, sprinting towards the dungeon entrance as the world crumbled around him. With the ceiling threatening to bury him, he dove through the portal in the nick of time, tumbling to a halt inside the dungeon. As he picked himself up, a sight both eerie and fascinating met his eyes. Rows upon rows of tombs. This place, he realized, was no ordinary cave but a dungeon of the highest rank. His heart raced as he spotted a figure in the distance. For a moment, fear gripped him, imagining a monster lurking. But then, noticing a blue level window, relief washed over him. It was another person, not a monster. A glimmer of hope sparked within him. Dungeons that housed other people were open dungeons, and this person might be a hero here to conquer it. Filled with newfound hope, he rushed towards the figure, calling out for help, convinced he had found his salvation. But as he tried to bridge the gap between them, the mysterious figure unleashed a blinding burst of light and uttered a cryptic message. "He who has amassed endless effort, there lies what he has desired." The words echoed in his ears, clear as day, even from a distance. Confused and slightly panicked, he attempted to engage the man in conversation, only to be met with silence. It was as if time had frozen around the man, no response, no movement, nothing but the occasional burst of light and the repetition of that enigmatic phrase. For a moment, he thought the man might be an NPC, a character from a game, not a person of flesh and blood. It baffled him. In a world where reality seemed to blend with the elements of a game, the existence of an NPC in real life was unheard of. Could he be the first to encounter such a phenomenon? With each attempt to interact, the man mechanically repeated his statement until, unexpectedly, he broke character, cursing and revealing his frustration at being stuck in a loop of his own making, pretending to be an NPC. The revelation that the man was actually the dungeon's manager, and in his own words, something akin to an NPC, only added to the surreal nature of their encounter. When asked for a way out, the manager delivered the shocking news: the only escape was to clear the dungeon, a daunting task for someone of level 46 in an SS-rank dungeon. The manager's advice that levels and health were meaningless here, that luck was the key factor, offered a glimmer of hope amidst the impossibility of the situation. Curiosity piqued, he pressed for clarity on the type of luck the manager referred to. The explanation that his mere presence in the dungeon signified a special condition, a stroke of fortune, hinted at possibilities yet to unfold. Perhaps, as the manager suggested, luck would favor him again, leading him to discover the hidden piece that lay somewhere within the dungeon's depths. He stood there, breathing heavily, his mind racing with thoughts of doubt. Could he really take on such a challenge with only a level 46 and a mere 5 points of health left? The man, sensing his hesitation, simply turned, his voice calm but firm. "Time's up. I wish I could offer more help, but I can't exceed my limits." His heart sank as he watched the man begin to float, disappearing with words of encouragement, urging him to never give up, for perseverance would unlock the doors to the power he sought. Evade death and uncover the truth, the man's voice echoed as he vanished in a blinding light, leaving behind a cryptic message about the only one who could save him. Blinking against the bright afterglow, he caught sight of a new quest notification urging him to find a weapon. Before he could process the task, the man's voice offered one last piece of advice: to beware of the sky's painful rain. Looking up, he was astounded to see a shower of weapons descending like meteorites. A scissor sword landed with a thud beside him, sending him into a frenzied dance to dodge the lethal rain. When the barrage ceased, and the weapons lay embedded in the ground around him, relief washed over him. He had survived yet another unimaginable dagger. But his relief was short-lived. The sky darkened ominously, and as he looked up, his eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of a massive bull plummeting towards him. "This is madness," he exclaimed, narrowly escaping its crushing descent. Face down on the ground, he slowly looked up, only to find himself staring into the eyes of the enormous creature. The system revealed its level with 3 daunting question marks, a clear indication that it was leagues beyond his own strength. The reality of his situation hit him. He was in a fight for his life against impossible odds. Remembering the man's words, he knew his only escape was to clear the dungeon. With no other options, he steeled himself for the battle ahead. Despite the overwhelming fear and doubt, he understood that this was a test of not just his strength but his will to survive. He glanced at the array of weapons behind him, his eyes settling on a majestic sword. The moment he grasped the sword, a notification flashed before him, declaring it the great sword of brilliance of legendary grade, boasting an attack power of 1050. He was stunned. How could such a powerful weapon be so easily within his reach, with no restrictions on wielding it? Confidence surged through him as he brandished the sword, suddenly feeling like escaping the dungeon might not be as daunting as he initially thought. With determination, he approached the slumbering giant bull, aiming to end the confrontation with a single, decisive blow. He struck with all his might, but to his astonishment, the bull remained unscathed, not even stirring from its slumber. The display read 0 damage. Disbelief washed over him as he heard the bull's steady snores continue unabated. Wasting no time, he dashed for another weapon, grabbing a barbarian warrior's battle axe. It was legendary, its attack power an impressive 1100, enhanced further by special passive skills. With renewed hope, he attacked the bull again, only to find his efforts fruitless as before. The bull remained unharmed. Then, the bull rose, turning its massive form towards him. Panic set in as the bull's gaze fixed on him, and when it charged, fear took over. He managed a hasty, "hello," hoping for a miracle, then turned and fled, screaming. But in a moment of desperation, he found his courage, sidestepping the bull's charge with agility that surprised even himself. He sprinted away, calling for help, when laughter broke through the tension. The man he had thought a hero was merely an observer, amused by his plight. Frustrated and feeling betrayed, he confronted the man, who seemed unfazed by the danger they were in. Anger bubbled within him as the man's laughter echoed in the dungeon, a stark contrast to his own fear and desperation. He vowed revenge against both Yong and this man if he ever made it out alive. Then, amidst the chaos, a moment of clarity struck him. He recalled a lesson from his school days, a hint of wisdom that now seemed eerily relevant. The answer lies within the problem. As he stood amidst a sea of weapons, his mind raced. The words echoed in his mind, a reminder that among the countless weapons before him, only one held the key to victory against the monstrous bull. With over 1,000 options and not a moment to waste, he felt the weight of his impossible task. Panic set in as he realized the bull wouldn't wait for him to make a choice. In a moment of desperation, he grabbed a handful of weapons, hurling them at the charging beast, hoping against hope to find the one weapon that could save him. But the bull, unfazed and angrier than ever, charged at him with renewed fury. The system's alerts, flashing incessantly, confirmed his worst fear. None of the weapons had any effect. Dodging the bull's attacks with grace, he couldn't help but hear the man's taunt, suggesting he might be better off as a matador than a hunter. Then, as the bull swung its massive tail, he instinctively grabbed a nearby shield, blocking the attack just in time but getting thrown into the air. crashing to the ground, he used the shield to halt his momentum, discovering it was no ordinary shield but the shield of the fallen king, equipped with the power to absorb damage. Yet, even this discovery came too late as his health points drained to 0, stripping him of his enhanced abilities and leaving him vulnerable. Facing the charging bull once more, despair set in. He was on the brink of giving up when the man's voice pierced through his resignation, urging him to stand and fight. Despite his frustration, he listened, reaching for the weapon to his left as instructed. His hand found the hilt of a sword, the system revealing it to be the wind sword of heroic grade, endowed with the power to unleash a mighty airgun attack. Confusion washed over him as he gripped the sword. With the bull bearing down on him, he pondered the significance of this weapon and its ability. As he braced himself against the looming threat of the bull, he gripped the sword tighter, unleashing a powerful gust of wind on command. The mysterious man beside him instructed him to target the 09.00 direction. Trusting the guidance, he released the wind, but the force was so strong it sent him flying back into a tree, the impact forcing blood from his mouth. Crumpled on the ground, he realized he was out of health and mana points, his body too battered to even contemplate escape. Lying there, defeated, he wondered if this was how his story would end. But then, his eyes caught the glint of a dagger embedded in the tree nearby. This was no accidental placement. Unlike the random weapons scattered across the battlefield, this dagger was deliberately placed. The mysterious man then revealed that he hadn't led him to the dagger. He had found it on his own. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, he managed to stand and leap towards the tree, grabbing the dagger. On closer inspection, the system revealed the dagger was of an unidentified grade and required a contract to wield. By claiming the dagger, he had inadvertently completed a quest, with his new mission being to defeat the giant bull and seal the contract with the weapon. The bull, meanwhile, was not idle, charging its head with a menacing thunder. He questioned the man if defeating the bull was the key to ending this ordeal, to which the man affirmed. The bull, now a mass of swirling thunder, charged. The man explained that the dagger held an unidentified skill, its power unknown until used. The moment of truth had arrived. Yet there he stood, hesitant. But as the bull barreled towards him, something within him ignited. With a battle cry for life, he lunged at the bull, dagger poised. The weapon pierced the bull's thunderous charge, triggering an explosive release of energy. When the dust settled, he found himself gazing up at a pristine ceiling, alive and bewildered. The system chimed in, announcing the completion of the contract and the activation of the tutorial system. He was now tasked with leveling up to 10, leaving him to wonder if this meant he had conquered the SS rank dungeon. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of a lady, his sister, whose presence surprised him. His confusion about their survival only angered her. Her frustration evident as she demanded to know why she would be dead. Then his sister rushed to inform their anxious parents waiting outside that he had finally awakened. His mother, overcome with a mix of relief and anger, couldn't help but scold him, her worry manifesting as a sharp smack on his back. "What were you thinking?" she demanded, her concern for him clear in her voice. He protested, the pain from the smack evident, and sought refuge in his father's intervention. But his father, equally upset, saw no reason to coddle him, reinforcing the lesson that he should have prioritized his safety. Reflecting on his father's words, he couldn't help but agree. The entire ordeal made him see Yong's true nature, a person focused solely on results, betraying him when it mattered most. He pondered the what-ifs, realizing that avoiding Yong could have spared him from Yong's betrayal. It dawned on him that Yong's disregard for him was the root cause of the debacle, yet he acknowledged his own naivety in trusting Yong too readily. Amidst this turmoil, he attempted to lighten the mood, reassuring his parents that he had returned safely and would be more cautious in the future. His sister, however, hinted at a deeper issue, suggesting that perhaps the path of a hunter wasn't meant for him. Confused and concerned by her insinuation and their parents' silence, he was led to a mirror. Bracing for the worst, he was confronted not with a physical scar, but with the shocking revelation that his level had plummeted to 1. The shock sent him spiraling into panic and disbelief. Alone with his thoughts, he reflected on his journey. Not driven by greed, but by a desire to escape the clutches of poverty. The realization that his years of struggle had seemingly been for naught left him cursing his fate. Yet, as he faced his reflection once more, a calmer, more introspective side emerged. Remembered whispers hinted at his mysterious reappearance as a level 1 at the site of a collapsed dungeon, presenting him with a puzzle that defied logical explanation. Lying there, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts after his last harrowing encounter, he mulled over the possibility of re-entering that formidable SS-rank dungeon to seek out the man he had met. But the way forward was shrouded in uncertainty. There was no telling if the dungeon would even reappear. Frustrated, he buried his face into his pillow, feeling the weight of the world's unfairness on his shoulders. Despite his efforts in conquering the SS-rank dungeon, he had nothing to show for it. No treasures, no items, only a reset to level 1. Just then, a mosquito buzzed annoyingly close, landing on his pillow. Though his family had given him space, these persistent mosquitoes seemed determined to keep him company. With a swift hand, he shooed the mosquito away, deciding to let it go this time. Sitting up, he pondered over his next move. With no clear path forward, he wondered if taking out a loan for dungeon tours was his only option, despite the financial burden it would entail. It seemed like a quick way to regain his levels, but then, the mosquito returned, landing provocatively on the wall near him. Annoyed beyond patience, he smacked it with a triumphant power smash. Proudly, he thought to himself that 7 years of battling monsters hadn't been for nothing. Even at level 1, a mosquito was no match for him. Suddenly, his system sprang to life, announcing the activation of tutorial mode. It bombarded him with messages, revealing that he could gain experience by killing a non-monster creature, like a mosquito. With 1 experience point from the mosquito's demise, his level ticked up, his debuffs vanished, and his health and mana points began to regenerate. The commotion drew his sister and mother to his room, inquiring about the ruckus. He explained, as calmly as he could, that he had leveled it up from killing a mosquito. His sister checked him for a fever, then suggested maybe a visit to a psychiatrist might be in order. A suggestion their mother agreed sounded sensible. Frustration boiled over as he insisted on the truth of his experience, but his sister merely pointed him to the mirror, urging him to confront reality. The reflection showed him still at level 1, a revelation that left him shouting in disbelief, insisting on the impossibility of what he saw. His fingers flew over the system interface, double-checking. Yes, his level had indeed spiked up, a fact that should have filled him with elation. Yet, amidst his excitement, he realized he had glossed over an important alert. Diving back into the messages, his heart sank as he discovered the reason behind his sudden level reset to 1. The effect from the contract of the beginner's dagger had been triggered. Memories flooded back. Was this the same dagger he wielded in his clash against the giant bull? Could this be why he was back to square one? Frantically, he dialed Siora, his sister, inquiring about the dagger's whereabouts. Her response, that a government official had taken an interest in it, sent him into a spiral of panic. Learning it was stored in the personal belongings locker on the first floor. He couldn't contain his frustration, his abrupt departure leaving his mother filled with concern. He pieced it together. The man in the SS rank dungeon had hinted at the dagger being a hidden piece, a term now echoing ominously in his mind. It wasn't just any dagger. It was a secret weapon bestowed upon those who met certain cryptic conditions. As he reached for the door, eager to reclaim the dagger, it swung open unexpectedly, striking him. Yang stood there, an incongruous figure holding a flower. The sight sparked anger, not gratitude, in him, leading to a heated confrontation pulled short by his mother's intervention. Despite Yong's significant role in covering his hospital expenses, a kindness he couldn't easily dismiss, the tension escalated. Pressed to have a private word with Yang, he ushered his concerned family out. His mother's worried inquiries about his intentions towards Yang were met with a dismissive assurance. What harm could he possibly do, he mused bitterly, now that he was back to being level 1. Once he made sure Zura had taken their parents to the cafe for a bit of fresh air, he turned to Yang, his anger barely contained. "Why did you do it?" he demanded, seeking answers. Yang's response was dismissive, explaining the daily trials of being an heir, with today's challenge being the Circle Miss token. He admitted to being in the boss room when Circle Miss self-destructed, a necessary presence for the loot to drop, almost as if it were just another day. His temper flared at Yang's casual explanation. "You risked a life for a test?" he pressed, incredulous at the trivialization of such a dangerous act. Yang, unfazed, defended the importance of the succession battle, claiming it was a matter of life or death for him, something he believed someone from a humble background could never comprehend. The conversation escalated quickly, turning physical as he grabbed Yang by the collar, outraged at his callousness. Yang, however, was unmoved, warning him against any attempts at retribution, hinting at the futility and potential backlash of such actions. The mention of settling the matter with money had once seemed like an acceptable outcome, but Yang's arrogance had now pushed him to the edge. Yang's insinuations about his sister only fueled his anger further, driving him to attempt a punch. Just as his fist neared Yang's face, Minhyuk's embrace stopped him. Minhyuk's tears and relief at finding him alive momentarily diffused the tension, even as Yang mocked their close bond. Yang's departure, with a parting jibe about not wanting to interrupt, left him fuming, demanding Yang to stay. But Yang was already gone. Pushing Minhyuk away, he couldn't shake off the weirdness of the moment, despite the deep concern shown by his friend. But when Minhyuk revealed the dagger, thinking he was offering a helping hand, things took an unexpected turn. He pushed Minhyuk away with a mix of surprise and frustration, demanding space. Minhyuk, taken aback by the harsh reaction, couldn't help but question if such a cold response was warranted, especially since he came bearing what he thought was a significant item, the dagger. Curious and a bit confused, he asked Minhyuk about the weapon he mentioned. With a hint of mystery, Minhyuk produced the dagger from beneath his coat, claiming it was the very one found with him, now returned after the investigation. The moment the dagger was in sight, he grabbed it eagerly, surprising Minhyuk. Holding the dagger, a flood of recognition washed over him. This was unmistakably the weapon he wielded within the treacherous SS-rank dungeon. Minhyuk, observing the tight grip and the intense gaze, remarked on the dagger's ordinary appearance, questioning its significance. The inquiry about the investigation's findings only revealed the dagger to be of a regular grade, with a seemingly unimpressive attack power of 100 and devoid of any special traits. This revelation left him puzzled. Could a weapon from such a daunting dungeon really be so mundane? Alone later in his hospital room, he couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to the dagger. Commanding the system to analyze it, he braced himself for the ordinary. However, the truth unveiled was anything but. The dagger was a beginner's mythic grade weapon, boasting an attack power of 5500 and equipped with a skill that could turn the tides of fate. A level 1 annihilation strike, to be unleashed in the brink of defeat, granting 10 seconds of invincibility and the power to obliterate any foe's health completely. The revelation that it was a soul contract item meant its true capabilities were veiled to others, a secret weapon visible in its full glory only to its rightful owner. The dagger not only promised unparalleled strength, but also a unique opportunity. The soul contract effect would reset his level to 1 after every use, a seemingly harsh penalty that masked an incredible advantage. Each monster defeated would now ensure a swift ascent in levels, his outward level deceivingly low but his actual prowess locked in, unchangeable and formidable. He knew the dagger he found wasn't just any ordinary weapon. It held power enough to tip the scales of any battle, making him a target for those who wished to wield such might. But the realization that only he could wield it, thanks to a binding contract visible to him alone, made him ponder the worth of holding on to such a double-edged sword. The thought of dying to break the contract and sell the dagger seemed absurd. So, lying there, tangled in his sheets and thoughts, he knew there was only one path forward: to brave the dungeons himself. With the dagger in hand, he figured he could tackle C-rank dungeons, maybe even B-rank ones, turning his situation into an opportunity. As he mulled over his newfound resolve, the system unveiled potential rewards. Sets that promised power but also painted a target on his back. The idea of others hunting him for these pieces, much like Choi Yi-yang's betrayal, sent a shiver down his spine. He knew then that solitude was his ally, his decision to venture alone solidifying with each passing second. Determined, he began with the simplest of tasks: the tutorial. The unsuspecting mosquito against the wall became his first conquest, and soon, 10 more followed. The system's prompt to claim his reward brought a smile to his face, a small victory in what felt like an endless night. But as he pondered his next move, an unexpected guest arrived, not a person, but a treasure chest, plummeting from above. Dodging it by a hair's breadth, he couldn't help but muse on the absurdity of treasure chests falling from the sky as if it were the most natural occurrence in the world. As he approached the chest, anticipation bubbled within him. The idea of riches untold filled his mind, only for disappointment to take its place as he found nothing but a worn, hole-ridden shirt. His frustration was palpable, the shirt flying through the air in a fit of anger, only to land on the unsuspecting face of his team leader who had just walked in. The sight of his leader, adorned in the dirty garment, was as shocking as it was unexpected. As he glanced back, trying to figure out what had just happened, he quickly noticed the uniform the man was wearing. A clear indication he belonged to the Hunter Management Agency. That realization hit him like a ton of bricks, making him understand the gravity of his earlier actions. The man, removing the shirt from his face with a mix of annoyance and bemusement, mentioned he'd heard reports of his mental instability, which now didn't seem too far off. Apologizing profusely, he hoped his mistake hadn't landed him in too deep trouble. The man, after discarding the shirt, fixed him with a gaze that was unsettling, yet strikingly captivating. He couldn't help but marvel at the man's appearance, even in such a tense situation. Then, breaking the silence, the man introduced himself as young Sahun, the head of Public Security Division 4 of the Hunter Management Agency, and curiously asked if he had leveled up. The question took him by surprise. How could Sahun know about his leveling up? Could Seora have spilled the beans? His thoughts were interrupted as Sahun called over Deputy Kim to take his measurements. The device Kim used seemed to be a stat measuring tool, and he anxiously awaited the results. When Kim reported his stats, strength 75, agility 66, intelligence 32, unchanged from his initial assessment, he breathed a sigh of relief, realizing the device couldn't detect his distributable points. Sahun's inquiry about his name being Lee Jin-woo and whether he had indeed leveled up caught him off guard. He stuttered a response, uncertain how to explain the situation without revealing too much. Sahun's probing about the clarity of leveling up and the appearance of messages in the system window only added to his anxiety. He admitted the message had appeared but vanished, which Sahun found peculiar. With a mix of curiosity and suspicion, Sahun asked if he could open his status window for a check. Heeding Sahun's call to pause, he swiftly pulls up his status window. The display confirms he's of normal grade, with a surprising 50 points available for distribution. His health and mana points are brimming at full capacity. A realization dawns on him. The increase in distribution points confirms that his ascent to level 10 wasn't a figment of his imagination. Without officially engaging with the system, he had inadvertently leveled up, each level gifting him 5 points, summing up to a total of 50. Puzzled, he follows the instruction to don the tattered, sleeveless shirt of the Nightwalker, wondering if this peculiar garment might hold the key to a quest. As Sahun's patience wears thin, he probes about any shifts in level. The answer is a simple no, with an admission that nothing noteworthy has transpired. Sahun's skepticism is palpable, prompting further inquiry. In an awkward turn, he confesses a sudden reluctance to part with the shirt, hinting at its potential utility and clumsily invoking the principles of reuse, reduce, and recycle as a makeshift justification. Sahun and Kim exchange bewildered glances. Kim, under her breath, suggests to Sahun the need for a medical consultation, doubting the soundness of Jinwoo's state. Perhaps, they speculate, this is the awakening of a special ability. Sahun softly concurs, though Jinwoo catches every word. With formality, Sahun advises him of the legal necessity to report any awakenings or newfound abilities to the Hunter Management Agency, cautioning against the unauthorized use of powers under the Special Hunter Law. Once alone, Jinwoo exhales in relief, mindful of the agency's potential to confiscate the hidden piece had they been aware. His resolution is firm: this secret will be guarded closely. Slipping on the Nightwalker's tattered shirt, the system immediately updates his status to normal grade with an enhanced defense of 20. A reward notification pops up, presenting an upgrade stone and instructions for its use. Curiosity piqued by the sound of a falling stone, he discovers a green stone, emanating a mysterious flame. Unfamiliar with such an artifact, he presses it against the shirt, which consumes the stone eagerly. A vibrant green glow envelops the garment, and as the light fades, so do the shirt's imperfections. The system now boasts of the shirt's elevation to superior grade with a defense of 50, alongside a newfound skill, stealth. This skill, capable of concealing the wearer's presence, deactivates upon impact, drawing 30 MLP every 10 seconds. Astonished by the enhancement and the addition of a skill, he marvels at the utility and potential value of the shirt, were it not soul-bound. However, as he tried to catch his own gaze in the mirror, he realized something unsettling. His reflection was missing. It was as if he could see himself standing there, but the mirror showed no sign of him. Puzzled, he glanced down to find his pants and boxers discarded on the floor. When he picked up his boxers, he noticed they didn't completely vanish from sight, which led him to wonder if the invisibility had limits, only affecting parts of what it touched. Curiosity getting the better of him, he grabbed his dagger, and to his astonishment, the entire dagger disappeared from view, even though he was only holding the handle. This observation sparked a thought that perhaps this phenomenon required further investigation. Just then, a notification popped up, warning him that all magical power was depleted, and his stealth mode would soon end. True enough, his invisibility began to fade, revealing him once again to the world. Despite this, his spirits were high. His level had reached 10, he had acquired a dagger that could break the balance of power, and he had stumbled upon an item granting him stealth capabilities. He couldn't contain his excitement, exclaiming that he had indeed struck gold. But his celebration was short-lived. Siora, his sister, barged into his room to inform him that the Hunter Management Agency was on the lookout for him. However, she froze in her tracks at the sight of him in his undressed state. Mortified, she called out for their parents, convinced her brother was in dire need of psychiatric help, while he scrambled to clarify the misunderstanding. Later, he ventured outside, surveying the destruction that lay before him. As he lifted his gaze, a new message from the system materialized above him, presenting him with a quest. He needed to defeat 5 boss monsters, a challenge he presumed had been triggered by the upgrade of his hole-ridden sleeveless shirt. Determined to level up through hunting monsters rather than mere mosquitoes, he set off. He paused behind a large building, stealthily observing the gate guarded by 2 hunter agents. Their presence irked him, not just for their diligent surveillance but for the tolls they continued to impose despite everything. Knowing he had to move forward, he activated his stealth skill and made his way towards the gate. The guards, oblivious and bored, didn't notice him as he slipped by them undetected. But then, his heart skipped a beat when he spotted a skill sensor. He quickly turned off his stealth mode as he dashed past the skill sensor, then flicked it back on once he was safely out of its range. Darting forward, he couldn't help but feel like he was in the middle of a spy movie, his heart racing with excitement. Soon, he reached the area where hunters were queuing up for their next adventure into the dungeons. He meandered around, puzzled by the unusual crowd at the D-rank dungeons, which were typically deserted. Suddenly, a warning flashed before his eyes. Over half of his mana points were gone, and his stealth mode was on the verge of shutting down in just 40 seconds. Panicked, he made a beeline for the dungeons, ready to dive into any available portal. But then, his phone vibrated with an urgent message from the Hunter Management Agency. The B-rank dungeon attempt had failed, and an open portal awaited at Cafe Dona by Gangnam Station, exit 12. He realized he needed to head in that direction, but then, chaos erupted. A massive lizard warrior crashed into the cafe, its fierce eyes locked on him. The creature lunged, striking him in the shoulder. The pain was intense, knocking him to the ground. His system flashed another alert. Monsters had seen through his stealth due to his low skill level, and the hit had not only broken his stealth but also reduced his health points to 0. Lying there, He understood the peril of letting his guard down, even when cloaked in stealth. Just as he was grappling with his mistake, the system presented a glimmer of hope. He had triggered the conditions for an annihilation strike, granting him 10 seconds of invincibility and the power to wipe out any enemy's health points in a single blow. With determination, he stood up, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have been avoided. But first, he needed to address the immediate threat: the lizard warrior. With a single command, his dagger materialized in his hand. He marveled at the wonder of soulbound items, ready at a moment's notice. The lizard charged again, weapons blazing. But this time, he was shielded by his sleeveless shirt. Each hit landed, yet he felt nothing. A stark reminder of the incredible protection his gear provided. Wrapped in what felt like an invisible shield, he stood unharmed as the lizard warrior's attacks bounced off him, leaving the creature stunned and fearful. With a smirk, he taunted the beast. "Are you done?" Before leaping into action. "Now it's my turn," he declared, his voice filled with determination. With a swift throw of his shining dagger, he targeted the lizard warrior's neck, and in a spectacular display, the creature's head exploded upon impact. As he landed, a notification popped up, rewarding him with an experience point for his victory. His level went up and he felt a surge of power as he gained 5 points. Every trace of damage and fatigue vanished, his health and magic power fully replenished. Thanks to his contract, his level reset to 1, but he couldn't help marveling at his dagger's lethal efficiency, aptly named Annihilation Strike. But his triumph was short-lived. The sound of approaching footsteps alerted him to the presence of others. A hunter was querying a lady about the recent commotion, speculating on the arrival of a knight. To his dismay, the lady pointed right at him as the likely hero. Panic surged through him, realizing that being discovered would force him to reveal how he, a mere level 1, had defeated a B-rank monster. The risk of exposing his secret skill was too high. He hastily retreated, seeking cover, yet he remained close enough to overhear their conversation. Suddenly, another lizard monster appeared, striking him on the head and sending his cup flying. Luckily, his invincible state protected him, and he suffered no harm. Frustrated, he informed the lizard that it had made a grave mistake, as he still had 1 second of invincibility left. The creature's fear was palpable as it awaited its fate, which was swiftly sealed with another expert swing of his dagger, causing it to vanish into thin air. The hunters nearby were astounded by his prowess, unable to believe that he had dispatched the lizard with a single blow. They murmured among themselves, questioning if he was some kind of real knight, especially after noticing his low level. Overhearing their doubts, he felt a rush of panic and took off running, even as one of the men attempted to grab him. Shouts of "Stop!" filled the air behind him, but fortune favored him once more as lizard warriors emerged, attacking the hunters and diverting their attention. The men were baffled, wondering how he had managed such a feat. Meanwhile, the captain decided to pursue him personally, leaving his men to deal with the chaos. As the captain called out to him, he couldn't help but think of their persistence in chasing him down. But to his surprise, instead of one hero, he found himself facing a group of hunters. The group's leader, a man with an authoritative air, quickly ordered his team to seize him. Yet, with a swift activation of his stealth skill, he vanished right before their eyes, slipping away to the side as the hunters looked around in confusion, questioning each other about the sudden disappearance. The leader, frustrated, demanded to know how they could let him slip away. The men protested, pointing out the difficulty in capturing someone who could just disappear into thin air, questioning the leader's motives for pursuing the man over merely using a skill. The leader then revealed the real reason for their chase. The man had defeated a lizard warrior with a single hit. Hearing this, the man hiding couldn't help but be astonished by his own feat, considering he was only at level 1. The conversation among the hunters hinted at the possibility of him possessing an item of legendary or mythic grade, sparking greed and determination in their eyes as they recalled the rule of finders keepers. Realizing he was dealing with unscrupulous, greedy individuals, he knew he had to escape. His plan, however, was momentarily thwarted by the sound of breaking glass underfoot, drawing the hunter's attention. As the leader swung his massive sword towards him, he narrowly escaped, his stealth skill fading due to low mana, making him visible once again. Despite the danger, he dodged an incoming blade and, in desperation, allocated all his remaining points to agility, unlocking a crucial sprint skill that boosted his speed but drained his mana. With the hunters in shock at his sudden burst of speed, he spotted a sinkhole with another dungeon portal. Without hesitation, he used his new skill to dash towards it. The hunters, convinced of his impending doom, shouted mockingly after him. Yet, he couldn't resist a final act of defiance, flashing a cheeky gesture before leaping into the sinkhole, leaving the stunned and insulted hunters behind. The men peered into the sinkhole, their hopes dwindling, convinced that their venture was futile since it wasn't a group dungeon. Venturing inside, they believed, would likely lead them to yet another dungeon, not the treasure they hoped for. The captain, with a note of finality, explained to his bald companion that should they fail to conquer the dungeon, a portal would forcibly open, revealing that the dungeon the lone adventurer had stumbled into was of rank C. Their plan then was to bide their time, wait for the adventurer's inevitable demise, and upon the portal's opening, swoop in to claim the spoils left behind. The bald man, curious, inquired what would unfold if, against all odds, the man managed to defeat the dungeon's guardian, the lizard warrior. The captain, with unwavering confidence, dismissed the notion outright. He had ventured into that very dungeon before and was well acquainted with its unique challenges. The prospect of the man surviving, let alone triumphing, was inconceivable. Meanwhile, as the adventurer plummeted, the system chimed in, alerting him of his descent into a rank C dungeon. Bracing himself for impact, he landed with a thud that wrung a groan from his lips. The harsh landing had him jokingly considering the necessity of a parachute for such entries in the future. Surveying his surroundings, he found himself encased by towering walls, the serenity of the environment belying the danger that lay ahead. With no monsters, landmarks, or visible exits, he questioned the nature of his predicament. That brief moment of peace was shattered by the system's warning. The mission was to commence in 10 seconds, urging him to ready himself for combat. Drawing his dagger, he readied himself as instructed, his objective clear. Survive by defeating the monsters within the allotted time. As the countdown reached its end, a level 90 slime monster caught his eye from above. Unlike the obscured levels of typical dungeon foes, this creature's level was conspicuously displayed, its appearance almost endearing. With a mix of bravado and whimsy, he beckoned the slime, promising a swift end. However, as the first slime made its descent, another followed suit, then another, until he was faced with a veritable deluge of slimes. What initially seemed a manageable challenge quickly escalated into a nightmarish swarm. Overwhelmed and horror-struck, he could only shout in dismay as the slimes engulfed him, a stark realization dawning on him. This battle would not be won with a single, sweeping strike. Glancing at his dagger, he pondered the cooldown of such a potent skill. Relying solely on annihilation strike left him dangerously vulnerable during its recharge. Facing the grim possibility of being defenseless, he prepared for the worst-case scenario, navigating this perilous world without the crutch of his most powerful skill. Using his sprint skill, he dashed towards the slimes, wondering why his journey was always filled with challenges. As he approached, one of the slimes split into two and struck him on the side. Glancing at his system, he noticed his health had dropped to 80% from the slime's attack. The pain was sharper than he expected, but he brushed it off, knowing that defeating these creatures would heal him through leveling up. With determination, he swung his dagger at one of the slimes, yelling for it to meet its end as he sliced it in half. He thought he had succeeded, but to his astonishment, each half of the slime grew an eye and continued to move. Frustrated, he questioned if they were amoebas, perplexed by their ability to divide. Now, he faced two level 45 slimes, doubling his trouble. He launched an attack, but the slimes dodged, and suddenly, a larger slime dropped from above, catching him off guard and attempting to engulf him. Cutting this slime in half only resulted in it splitting into two more slimes. Realizing he was encircled by the slimes, they coordinated their attack, bombarding him from all sides. The slimes overwhelmed him, each hit reducing his health further until only 5% remained. Desperate, he spotted a lone level 45 slime and charged at it, seeing it as his final opportunity. However, his attack was met with a direct punch from the slime, reducing his health to 0. Meanwhile, outside the sinkhole, the greedy men waited anxiously. The bald man questioned the captain about the feasibility of capturing more than 300 monsters in 10 minutes. The captain confirmed, explaining the challenge was compounded by the slime's ability to split. The bald man noted the time, remarking it had been 5 minutes since their level 1 companion entered the sinkhole. They speculated on whether he possessed a special item aiding his survival. The captain reasoned that by now, the level 1 adventurer should have triggered a dungeon break due to failure. Yet, he suggested they wait a bit longer, theorizing the adventurer might be using a stealth strategy to outlast the slimes and that the portal could open at any moment for them to capture the slimes. Unbeknownst to them, inside the dungeon, the level 1 adventurer was fiercely battling the slimes, gradually increasing his level despite the overwhelming odds. He charged into the midst of the slimes, his blade a blur as he dispatched them one after another. With each fall of his sword, his level shot up, until he stood victorious amidst a sea of items left behind by his fallen foes. The system chimed in to announce his rewards. 5 points gained, all negative effects cleared, his health and mana fully replenished, and, surprisingly, his level reset to 1. Yet the most thrilling update was his annihilation strike, now without any cooldown. Glancing at the timer, he noted he had 40 seconds remaining. A quick check of his status window revealed a staggering 1,500 distributed points. It had taken less than 10 minutes to achieve what would take a normal hunter over a decade. He couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at his extraordinary feat. As the countdown approached the final 15 seconds, the system's alert for the imminent arrival of the boss monster sparked a mix of anticipation and strategy in his mind. He had breezed through the slimes, but the true test of the dungeon was yet to come. With his cheat item in hand, he felt invincible, ready to face whatever the dungeon threw at him next. Collecting the items around him, he reflected on the power he wielded, a power he had never imagined possible. However, his thoughts were momentarily interrupted by the realization that his pursuers from earlier might still be waiting for him outside the dungeon. Would they still be there, eager to claim the items he had so skillfully acquired? Then, as the timer hit 0, the anticipated moment arrived. The boss monster made its grand entrance. He looked up, curious about the form this ultimate challenge would take. His heart skipped a beat as a massive wyvern, with eyes closed, emerged and circled above him. The sight left him frozen in shock, questioning whether his trusty dagger would suffice against such a formidable foe. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the captain and his men grew impatient. Despite the passage of over 30 minutes, there was no sign of the level 1 adventurer emerging from the sinkhole. Frustrations flared as the captain dismissed their complaints with a harsh command to leave if they were dissatisfied. The exchange quickly escalated, with demands for compensation met with disbelief and accusations of folly for trusting a stranger. Then the bald guy got real serious with the captain, explaining they jumped into the fray thinking it'd turn out to be a better deal than just wandering around a dungeon. And since they ended up missing out on the easy target they had set their sights on, he suggested the captain ought to make it worth their while. The captain was on the verge of brushing him off when he sensed someone creeping up behind him. Turning around, he found himself face to face with Suhoon and Kim from the Hunter Management Agency. Suhoon, with a tone of urgency, asked if anyone had ventured into the dungeon. Meanwhile, in the midst of all this, a wyvern unleashed a blast of blue fire, sending our hero scrambling for cover. He couldn't help but yell at the creature to knock off the fire-breathing antics. Taking a moment to catch his breath, he looked up, puzzled why the wyvern hadn't made a move to dive down even after 10 minutes. Frustrated, he glanced at his dagger, wondering what good an annihilation strike was if there was no chance to use it. His attention then shifted to a nearby dropped item, figuring he might as well make use of the assorted weapons lying around. When he picked up an unassuming item, it morphed into a weapon right before his eyes. The system pinged him that it was an old javelin, boasting a high grade with an attack power of 50. Taking aim at the wyvern, he knew this was more a test to see how the javelin would fare rather than expecting it to do much damage. With a burst of speed from his sprint skill, he hurled the javelin towards the wyvern. His heart sank a little when it fell short of reaching its target. Just then, the wyvern swooped down slightly and belched fire in his direction. Dodging swiftly, he realized he needed more strength if he was going to survive this. He quickly allocated some of his distribution points into strength, bumping it up to 110. The wyvern, seemingly unimpressed, descended further and launched another fiery attack. This time, he grabbed a sword and, with precise timing, threw it at the beast, striking it squarely. He couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement from the hit, even though he doubted it had done much damage. Eager to test his newfound strength, he scooped up another item from the ground and hurled it at the wyvern, hitting its wing. The system confirmed his attack was a success, dealing 1069 damage and dropping the wyvern's health to 96%. Buoyed by this small victory, he quickly gathered more makeshift weapons from the ground, believing he stood a chance even with the most basic of armaments. His next flurry of throws all found their mark, each dealing varying amounts of damage. With a relentless barrage of distant attacks, he managed to whittle the wyvern's health down to 29%. Despite the wyvern's dauntingly large health pool frustrating him, he kept at it until the creature made a surprise move, swooping down close to the ground and launching a fierce flame attack. Without a moment to spare, he found himself in the path of a scorching attack. Unable to move away in time, the flames licked his skin, dealing him 200 damage instantly and continuing to sear him for 100 damage every second over the next 10 seconds. The burn was so severe that his health plummeted to 57%. "This is insane," he cried out, shocked that a mere brush with the fire had slashed his health by almost half. As the wyvern took to the skies once more, he noticed a shift in its attack pattern. Seizing a weapon from the ground, he hurled it with all his might, hoping to end their battle swiftly. Yet, the wyvern effortlessly countered his attack with a blast of fire, melting his weapon mid-air and sending a direct flame towards him, which consumed him entirely. The damage was catastrophic, 5,000 points, reducing his health to 0. As darkness began to close in, he felt a deep sense of failure. But then, a glimmer of hope shone through. The system announced he had met a critical condition, triggering his annihilation strike, giving him one last shot at victory. With nothing left to lose, he grasped his dagger tightly. As the wyvern prepared to unleash another devastating flame, he threw his dagger with the last ounce of his strength. Miraculously, the system confirmed he had met the necessary condition to acquire a new skill, Burt Pierce. Empowered by this skill, his dagger sliced through the wyvern's flame like a hot knife through butter, striking the beast squarely in the mouth. In an instant, the wyvern's head detonated, scattering remains in every direction while a rain of dropped items showered him in victory. The system chimed in once more, rewarding him with the Burt Pierce skill, and to his astonishment, his level shot up. He gained 5 points, and his health and mana were fully restored, marking his triumph over the formidable one-eyed wyvern. Yet, in a twist of fate, his level was reset to 1, starting his journey anew with the knowledge and skills he had garnered from this epic battle.